Hey guys, welcome back, and now I think it's a good time to start implementing the inventory system. So far, what I did, and we will just recreate this step by step, I will show you now. I don't know how long this is gonna be, but I will also, of course, split this in several lectures, because building a complete inventory system where you can also interact with different item types is still a long journey. And I was thinking I might just want to show you like the complete logic for like having a spatial inventory system. So this means each item has a different shape. So a rocket launcher would be like the biggest one, for example, and then the herbal item or a key is gonna be really small. So, and then you can just move things around. This is all nice and sexy and stuff, but the problem is it's a lot of logic we have to keep in mind. We have to use different functions for the state. When you move something, you need to always loop and update what slot is currently occupied. We have to basically calculate everything, and it's a lot of logic. And I do have a spatial inventory system, a fully working, completely like done working spatial inventory system, but I know how long it's gonna take, and I know how tedious the process is. So I was just thinking, let's just do the same functions. The only thing we just avoid is the spatial inventory features. But still, you're gonna have a really nice looking inventory. You're gonna use all your like ammunition. You can reload from the inventory. You can use your key items from the inventory. You can inspect your items from the inventory. You can combine maybe a green herb with the red herb item to even create a new combined herb inside your inventory. So this is what we wanna do, all the essential elements. And this is why I will show you now in the first lecture how to basically create your inventory, how to show your inventory, how to hide your inventory, how to pick up items, how to set up your different thumbnails for that. So this means if you just pick up a cardboard, this is just an example, then you're gonna see the appropriate thumbnail for that. And we're also gonna have empty slots, and we still gonna do a lot of logic. And then after this lecture, we will just continue to actually do stuff inside our inventory and hover over items. So this is what I've not implemented yet, like using items and hovering over items and do different kinds of things. But as for now, for the pickup and the visual appeal, we do have something like this. So this is what I created, and I will give you all the resources. I will just tell you what you need to implement. This is all already available in the project here. This is your so-called resources project, like you always use. Okay, so you see we just have like 6 slots. This is just a uniform grid. So like I said, we're not gonna use a spatial function like a regular grid. We will just use a uniform grid. This means we do have like a basic logic where we can, for example, just add this empty slot, I should say, in row 0, row 1, and row 2. So you always have to keep in mind that an integer, in this case, uniform grid is using an integer as an input, will always start from 0. So this is why we have 3 rows. But row 0, row 1, and row 2 means those are 3 rows. You always have to keep in mind that integer is always starting on 0. And then we always going to have columns. Columns just means it's the vertical alignment of another slot. So 0 row, and the column would be 0, and column would be 1. And the row 2, in this case row 1, and then you're going to have the column 1, I'm confused. The column 0 and the column 1. And this is always column 0, column 1, and only those rows are 0, 1, and 2. But I will just show you, just for you now to understand how basically the alignment of an inventory is going to work inside Unreal Engine. And then if I just go here to this example mesh, I can now have like a spawning text, animated text, for example. For take, you always going to have all the images for that, so you can follow along. And then I can just pick it up if I want to by pressing F. And then if I just show my inventory again, you can see now that the empty slot is gone, and I just replaced this with cardboard box, I should say, just as an example. We cannot interact as of right now. This is something we're going to do in the next lecture. And then I can just update this, like picking up another one, and then I have 2. So now you can see he's putting it into like a vertical alignment. So this is just what I believe is fine, but this is completely up to you. I will just show you later. And then maybe we want to also get a different blueprint. So this is all actor BP. So we are using a actor blueprint. The cardboard box, for as an example, would be the master BP. So there's all the logic inside. It's not a lot of logic. It's actually just variables and just the collision. So overlap on begin component overlap and overlap. And this is basically it. But what we have so far, like the most of the stuff we have in our item blueprint, our actor blueprint, is like we have all the variables. I will show you later. So then I can just pick up another item, and now you can see that this is going to work. So everything is basically assigned, and he can distinguish like what kind of item it is, and he's aligning it properly. Okay, so this is what we have so far. And you can also see it's pausing the game. And you also have this blur effect if you want that. And also the background is getting a little darker. This is something you can set up, how strong you want that. I will just show you. And also like this nice backpack we have, just to make things a little more interesting. But yeah, so far so good. I will just show you when you go to the content drawer, and let's go to content. When you go to the inventory assets folder, I just renamed this to inventory assets. Okay, before it was just inventory. So just make sure this is the 05 folder, like you have already seen the previous lectures. And this is the reason I always update my resource project. This is the reason why sometimes it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But you can always follow along, because before I release this lecture, you're gonna have now a new folder here called UI inventory icons. Please make sure that you migrate everything. You can also just go to your Explorer inside this folder, content inventory assets, and you can just simply also just copy and paste this into your own project, because those are just pictures, textures, I should say. So this is also something you can do, or just right click like we always do and migrate this into your own project. And as for the healing, so we do have the combined herb, green and red herb. Those are not only the image for the inventory thumbnail, but also the material and the mesh. So you're gonna have the actual mesh. Let me just open this. If this is assigned, I hope that, yeah, it is assigned for the combined mesh, combined herb. So make sure, just in case if you don't have those things, all right. So this is not only, as I said, the thumbnail, but also the complete mesh we can also place and also later spawn inside our inventory to inspect it and rotate our item. We can, just like in Resident Evil, we can just completely rotate it. Maybe we can find something, a code or something, or you can read a document. This is the reason why we implement an inspection function from the inventory. So make sure that you also have those things. You don't need this for the lecture now, but in the future you're gonna need also those like bullets folder and the healing folder. So just make sure that you have this. And also next to that, what you should do is you need to go into your inventory folder. You also now have a new separate black folder called 12 inventory. This is why I renamed this. And inside this folder, this is something you're not gonna have now, okay? For your own project. When you open this resources folder, of course you're gonna have this, but you're working on your own project, and this is why we're gonna build this. But what you need to do is, here are also images, and you should also get those images and put this also in your own content. And I don't care how you call your folder, maybe thumbnails, just leave it as it is, images, I don't really care, but you really need those 5 textures also. So we can work with this. We need the inventory design for this lecture. We're gonna need the empty slot for this lecture, and we're also gonna need this for our example mesh we're gonna pick up. So we can see this in our inventory. So those are the 3 things we're gonna need now. And as for the AC inventory, the actor blueprint for our master item, also I created a child of the master item, and the E item type. This is all we create now in our own project, and all the widgets we also create in our own project now. So you don't need to worry about this, okay? Only those images, and that's it. You can just completely ignore the widgets folder, and also those things you can completely please ignore, because we built this from scratch. Okay, so now I will just save this resources project, and so this is now everything you have now as a download, and now I will just go into my own project. All right, so here we are now in my current project we are now working on. So you can see I don't have any inventory here, and everything is like I can just play this. Just keep in mind I completely have changed the overall quality. The scalability is like the lowest possible. You can see now it looks completely horrible, but this is just for me to have a nice and smooth and fast project. I don't really care for graphics here. So we are still here without any inventory, so I can't open up anything. I have no items I can use. But what we did previously is we have a zombie, we can shoot the zombie, we even can kill the zombie if we want to. We also have those things working, our impacts here as well, so for like electric, concrete or asphalt, also the direction is being calculated. We do have the glass and the wood. You can also see direction, impact, ceramic, metal. This can happen. Okay, so she can bite us, she can grab us. We are in danger, we can't run anymore. We are basically almost screwed, I should say. And if this happens again, we are basically dead. So you can see everything works. The biting animation is a montage. We are snapping perfectly to it. So the find look at rotation is working for both. So the find look at rotation, everything works. So it doesn't really matter from where you get bitten. you will always snap perfectly in front of her at the same position always, and always being rotated perfectly. You can also hear we have the sounds working. I just need to disable the line trace, but we do have our stop function here, and the feet, like the sound, the footstep sounds, they are all aligned, and we do have like a nice aim offset. We have all the effects being spawned from sounds and also particles. She has hit animations, and also we can kill her with impulse effect, full ragdoll system, and collision. Everything works perfect. And she's dead, and she can't do anything anymore. And we cannot collide with a dead body, so everything is perfect. Okay, so long story short, what I will just do is I will just delete her, this zombie PP. And also I don't need the weapon anymore, because now we are basically now creating our own weapon for our inventory. Not really create a weapon, we will just assign a new blueprint, so we can use the weapon from our inventory. So yeah, we have a lot of things to do. I just migrated my textures here, so just the way like you did here, and then I will create a new folder. Let me just call this one 12_inventory. And I will give it a black color, so just for me to see directly, this is my inventory, so this is quite important for me. Maybe not really completely pitch black, but let's say something almost black. Something like this. And then I will just get my textures here and just put this into my inventory, move here. Let me open this one, create a new folder. I call this one images. And I get those things, move them inside my images folder. You probably don't need to do that because you migrated it. I was just copy and pasting it from my Explorer, so I just a little lazy, but now I have to do a little more work here. Then we are going to need a new folder for widgets. This is what we're going to create. And then I will just leave the AC and the master item and all that. I will just leave it here. It's fine for now. As for the inventory assets, yes, I should maybe rename this. In my case, I will just put it, because I already have a 05. Let me just, in my case, put this to 13_inventory assets, just to organize my things next to my inventory. But this is completely up to you. And then I will also give this a nice color. So what I have now are the bullets folder, healing folder, and the UI inventory icons. Okay. And then I can just delete this empty folder here, because there's nothing inside. Let me just delete this one by one. Sometimes Unreal Engine doesn't like that, to delete a full hierarchy of folders. So sometimes you just have to delete subfolders here. Before we go into our inventory, let's go to input, because we need 2 more inputs. So let's go into actions. Let's just Control D this one maybe, it doesn't really matter. So we just have another IA input. We call this one pick up item. Let's open this one up because we need to assign the index trigger here. So let's go, we only need, I think we only need pressed. This is perfectly fine for us. Let's save this. And then we also just want to Control D this one, and let's just show inventory IA _ let's say inventory. So we have now the pickup function we will assign, and we also have now the inventory we are going to use for the tab button. Okay, let me just open this one as well. And we also only need the trigger being pressed. This is perfectly fine for us. Then we can go to the input again. Let's go to IMC default and let's add those inputs. This means we click on the plus here and let's search for the pickup first. Let's open up the pickup. And as for the pickup, this is up to you. I will just click on this keyboard here once and then press F and save this. And this is basically it. We will also just click on the plus here and let's just get the inventory. Let me open this one up, keyboard, and I press tab. So just make sure that you can also search here, but I will just click here once and then you can assign the button right away. Pretty cool stuff. So now this is being assigned. There's one more thing I just forgot before we start, otherwise the pause game is going to lead to trouble and you cannot really go back to your game. This means we need to go to our input, and when you go to the actions for the inventory, so once we press tab later and we are inside our inventory, we need to make sure, just in case if you want that, in my case I will do that, so let's disable, or I should say let's enable the trigger when paused. So we need to enable this. This just means once we use this node game paused or game being paused, then still we can use this specific button and we can just resume to our game basically. Otherwise this will not be affected, so no button is going to be affected. but the exception would be only for this assigned button, which would be our tab button. We can always use this to toggle between show inventory, hide inventory, and show inventory and hide inventory, even though the game is paused. But all the other buttons, of course, you can spam the buttons and nothing is gonna happen. Then finally, we can go to content. Let's open up the inventory folder, the black one here, and we need to create a lot of things first. So let's start by getting all the widgets first. Let's right click, let's go to user interface, let's do a widget blueprint, just click the top one here, the regular one, and we call this first one WB_inventory. So this one would be just to show our backpack, and then we just can Control D this one, just to make sure, because it's all the same stuff, basically it's empty, you can just duplicate. We need inventory buttons, so we need inventory buttons. Let's do Control D, we also need the inventory hover, like a hover effect, when we want to interact with our buttons, or with the item, I should say. Then Control D this one as well, and then we also want to make sure that we get the inventory slot. We're gonna need a separate one for this, and Control D, last but not least, this one would be for the pickup text. So we just call this one pickup text, and that's it. Then we go back, we need to create more. Right click here, let's go to blueprint, blueprint class. Let's click on the actor component, okay, this is pretty important. Not the actor here, but the actor component. And we call this one AC_inventory. This is our main component we attach to our character, and then from there we can access all the stuff we need. So most of the logic and all the functions are going to be inside this component. Then right click here, let's do another blueprint, but this time again this is just a simple actor BP for our weapon and herbal items, everything we grab, everything we're gonna pick up. So we just call this one BP_master item. So this is all the logic, and later when you want to have different kinds of items like a key, ammunition, revolver, shotgun, like different things you're gonna pick up, you just create here a child blueprint. And this just means that everything is the same, the logic is the same. He's still using all the logic here inside, but we can change our mesh, we can change our image, we can change our default variables. And this is pretty good and pretty mandatory for this process here. But we don't need a child right now. We're just gonna work with the master item for now. And then also we need, when you right click here, let's search for the enumeration. Let's just get this one, and I call this one E_item type. Let's open now the item type. So we want to start filling all those assets we just created. We want to start filling them out. So let's just add our first enumerator here, and then you can actually just spam the button. So why don't we just create a couple of things? So in my case, I just want to have a pistol. This is what comes into my mind. And then we might just want to have a revolver in this game later, so we can swap weapons. We want to have a green herb. We can later also interact with. We want to have a red herb, so we have two different herbal items, and we can even combine those once we have those two in our inventory and they are getting destroyed, and then we have a combined herb instead. Then we want to have a pistol ammunition. We also want to have revolver ammunition, makes sense. We want to have a key. So for me, this is everything I need, and then I would just do a box, let's do box testing. Just because we do have the master BP and my master BP, I would just spawn a cardboard box for this, just to keep things a little more organized. And I think for now, I would just delete the last entry here. Okay, so now I have everything here as for now, but feel free to always go back here. You can just add more things. So maybe you just want to have maybe you have a red key, or you have a blue key, or you have something else you're going to pick up for a quest or something. You can always go back here and add more things. Endless amounts you can add. Okay, but for now, this is fine for the E-item type. Now, let me just check here. So I did some screenshots just in case I don't forget anything from my own project here. So yeah, I think it's a good start by opening up the master item, the BP master item. So what you're going to need is we're going to add a static mesh, this one here. And also we're going to add a box collision. You can also use a sphere collision, but in my case, I would just use the box collision, and this is perfectly fine. The collision can be a child here of the static mesh, and I would just call this one collision box, or let me just call this one better pickup collision, being more specific. As for the static mesh, this is just an example. Okay, so like I said, let me get the cardboard, what is it called? Box As for the static mesh, I just realized I forgot to tell you, you also, of course, gonna need the cardboard box, which is in your resources folder. So sorry for that. Let me just quickly open up my resources project at the same time, and then we just migrate this pretty quick. It's just gonna take 1 minute. So here we are, just pretty quick simultaneously. I just opened this one up. Let me just quickly go to this mesh here. I can just click on this and then let me search for this BP. Then let me click on the mesh here, just pretty quick, and click on this binocular. So this is what I need, the static mesh. So I will just right click here on this one and let me just go migrate, which would be here in this case, migrate. So what I need is the cardboard box, material, the SM, and the textures, okay? So this is everything I need. Let me just hit OK, and then let's go to the project we are currently working on, content, and then just hit OK. And then I can just close this resources project. I don't need it anymore. Okay, cool. So now let me check my content drawer here. And I do have now the 1960s Fallout interior with my cardboard box, and also the textures are inside here. And I do also have the material for that. Pretty cool stuff. Okay, cool. So now I can just assign this. Let's just continue. We go, of course, back to our inventory. We open up again our BP master item. This is where we stopped. Okay, let's just click on the viewport and we can continue. So we want to go to static mesh and we want to finally get the cardboard box. Okay, it's already aligned on the ground by default. Pretty cool stuff. You can see we have the collision here already assigned. The line thickness, I put this to 1. You don't really need to do it, but in my case, I will just do it. And then let me just go to the side view, so for example left here, and let's just zoom in, and I want to make sure that I put this guy just something like this, and then I just want to scale this appropriately. It should be a little bigger, of course, than the mesh itself. Let's go to the front, and also we can just make this a little bigger here, like so. And let's go back to perspective. So now you have a nice collision. It shouldn't be too big, but it should be a little bigger, okay? So you can overlap with it, and then you can also collide and pick it up later. But I just want to keep things a little more procedural also. So what we can do, we can go to the variables here, okay? And let's start by creating our first variable. So let's click on the plus here, and the first one we call pick up collision. So this means when we have several items, our pick up collision should not be the same. Sorry, not rotator. We need a vector. Let's compile and save, and then we go to the construction script, and then you can just use the construction script here, and let's just get the pickup collision for now. And then we also need the pickup collision, so let me just put this here on top, and from here drag off and set box extend. So this is basically the stuff we can set up here when we click on the collision. There's something called box extend. So this just means if I click on the viewport, I can also just update this like so, and maybe I want to have this like so. It depends on what you want to have, but for default, let's just keep it like it is, 32 for each axis. When we go back to our construction script, I can just set the box extend later for each item. So in this case, I will just connect this one and compile and save. And then when I go back to the viewport, my pickup collision is now gone. But the good stuff is we can here, when we open up each item later, and also our child blueprints, our weapon, our herb item, we'll create child blueprints. You can always set up your box collision. And for the box, I will just say, okay, let's do 60, 40, 40 maybe, for example. And I might just want to switch this one maybe down to 40. Let's do 40, and let's, on this axis, let's do 30, maybe 36. And here, let's do 30. Okay, this is perfectly fine for me. So now I do have a nice box collision, pretty good stuff. And then I can just compile and save, and this is something you can always change later with each item when you create child blueprints. Okay, cool. Just for you to understand, it doesn't really matter now if you just change the box extend here on the pickup collision itself. Once you have this down here, the pickup collision we just created for ourselves, you can set the stuff here, and this just means that the construction script is now overwriting the box extend with the so-called pickup collision we created. So it doesn't really matter if you type in, for example, 000, you can just do that if you want, compile. It doesn't really matter because we are using this stuff for our construction script, so for our box extend instead. But I want to keep things clean, so for the pickup collision itself, I will just reset this here, so just to make sure that everything is sweet. Okay, cool. So the next thing we're going to do is we need to do a lot more variables to prepare our items. We need, for example, here, let's click on the plus. We need the name. Makes sense if you, just in case if you want to have this, change this to a type of name, and then you can just put this on top. Next thing we're going to need is, let's just click on the plus here. We're also going to need a thumbnail. And let's change this to texture 2D as an object reference. Then we're gonna need an item type, which would be here, the item type. Just search for this one we just created. Then we are going to need the item size. Okay, let's just change this to a vector. Then just Control D, this one. We create inspection size also. When we inspect an item from the inventory, we spawn this same mesh. And then it's going to make sense to have a different size when this is being spawned directly in front of us. Just in case we want to inspect this, something is really small, something is way too big. So this is why we're going to have inspection size also. Then we want to create the max stack. So just in case, if this is a stackable item, this is a type of integer. And then next to the max stack, we want to have a current stack also. Then we do a bool, which would be the is stackable. So like I said, it's a bool, and then just control click, this one. We also need a bool is weapon. Let me just do capital I. It looks better in my eye. So this looks better for me. Let me just switch this to I as capital letter. And then we need, let's just Control D, we need is healing item, Control D. We need also is key item. And then we also need is removable. So it might be removable or not. If it's a key item, it wouldn't be wise to do that. Let's also get a pickup sound. And let's change this to a sound cue object reference, Control D. Sorry, sometimes you need to click again. Control D, this would be then the use item sound. We just want to make sure that we have this also already available for us. Control D, and we want to make sure we have the reload sound. So maybe for the weapon, or you just want to click on the ammunition, the ammo. You can also just have a reload sound already available for you. Remove the sound is also something. When we trash or scrap something, then we also want to have a different sound for that, for each item maybe, if you want to. And then we should have an inspection sound. So this means when you go into the inspection, maybe for each item, you're going to have a different sound. This is just something I want to make sure you have the ability to do so. And then Control D, we do the healing amount. No, let's do damage. Damage first. Type of being an integer. And then Control D, the damage. And we also want to have an integer as the so-called healing effect. So the healing amount. So each item maybe just is going to have a different healing amount. Makes sense. For now, this is fine. This is basically like 95% of all the stuff we need for the BP master item. I just want to make sure that I put the thumbnail on the top here. So first name, then I want to have the thumbnail, and then I want to have the item type. And then I believe pickup collision is fine. Let me just check my project just to make it more reasonable here. Item size, then inspection max stack. So I'm just checking if everything is in the right order. But now I believe we are good to go. Okay, so let's compile and save. Now we can go to our widgets and prepare the widgets we need. So let me go to Content Drawer, widgets. Now let's go into our widgets. We open up the WB inventory. Let's search in the palette here on the top left. Let's search for canvas. We just drag the canvas inside our WB inventory. After that, I would like to have an image. Just get the image and drag this inside the canvas panel. For the image anchor, set this to the center. Then make sure that position X and Y is 0 and 0, and the size would be 1920 by 1080. And you need to align the pivot to 0.5 and 0.5 to make it completely centered and everything is filled out perfectly. Let's set the alpha channel to something like 0.5 and the color itself here to something like really dark. Let's use like a pitch black value, and then you will have something like that. And we call this, let's do F2, we call this darken. I just want to have the darker background for the inventory. Next thing after the image here, you want to make sure that you get a blur, a background blur, and just put it beneath, okay, not child to the darken, but beneath the darken is pretty important. When you click on the background blur, let's change the Z order to 1. So this would be the first thing which is being in our inventory, so our layer, the first layer, and then he's gonna spawn, or he's just gonna draw the blur effect, and the Z order of 2 would be next, and then 3 and 4 and 5. This is why you wanna make sure we just wanna blur this dark background. And let's do anchor to the center, the blur also. X and Y is 0, and the size will be 1920 by 1080, and 0.5 and 0.5 for the alignment. And we wanna make sure that we have the blur strength to something like 6, for example. So after the background blur, let's get another image. This image here, we put this also beneath, okay? So not being a child, but just beneath that. And we call this one backpack. For the backpack, same stuff, anchor is center, 0 and 0, 1920 by 1080, and 0.5, 0.5 and 0.5. And the image would be the backpack, which is called inventory design, I believe. Inventory design. Now you have this, and this doesn't look right because we need to get this one. Just copy the image size X and put this here. And for the Y, it's 1951. So just put this into the size Y on top. We just copy this. So now you have the exact same aspect ratio and everything is centered. Okay, cool. You can see now this is being blurred a lot. What we need to do, as for the Z order, while the background blur is being Z order 1, like I said, for the backpack, we changed this to 2. And now you can see that this stuff is not being beneath the blur, but it's now being on top. And then we can proceed. We need for the inventory a so-called scale box. The scale box we also put here on the bottom, so this is not being a child. As for the scale box, we need to position it also to the center. Okay, so this anchor point is now also being centered. And the values I do have is 8 minus 64, 328 and 439. And alignment is 0.5 and 0.5. So this is what I have approximately, but always feel free to adjust. So you can always just zoom in for the scale box and maybe just want to slightly put this here. And also let's just zoom in maybe down here. This is fine. And I believe this should be quite all right. And here on the top, we can just put this down a tiny bit, like so. Because the scale box, this is where we put in our grid, so our slots will be aligned properly. And the Z order, pretty important, we put this to a 3, okay? So now the darken would be 0, background blur is 1, backpack is 2, and the Z order is 3 for the scale box. But now pretty important, let me just check what I did here. So the next thing you need is a so-called uniform grid, okay? So the uniform grid panel. And I put this also beneath. So this is also not a child. And I want to make sure, because we need 2 grids. The first one is called a scale grid, because I want to scale the grid. Also here inside this inventory. This means I anchor that also to the center. And the values I have is something like 7.8 minus 34, 328 and 493. So similar like we have with the scale box. As for the Z order for the scale grid, put this to 4. So now this is also just, it doesn't really matter now anymore, but just to make things clean, it's okay. And then we need another uniform grid panel, but this time you put this into the scale grid. And this one I will call the slot grid. So this is where our actual slots are being spawned. So now you can see those slot grids are now attached or like assigned inside this one. And this is also the reason why you can't really see here the position and all that stuff, because the slot grid is also like part of this scale grid, okay? So now you can use a slot padding. In my experience, so what I did is 3. This just means that our empty icons, our empty pictures we have inside this slot being spawned have a little bit of padding, so like a tiny gaps. But I think this works quite fine for this dimension here. So make sure that you have a slot padding of 3. Last thing you need to do is you need to make sure that the backpack, you don't need to set this as a variable. You don't need to do that. Doesn't make any sense because it's just visual. We don't need to change anything. And also the darken, you don't need to have this as a variable. But what you definitely need to have as a variable would be the slot grid. Okay, so this is definitely something you need to have as a variable. Otherwise, we can't really build our inventory. When we go to graph now, You can just delete everything here. We don't need any events, but what you need are some variables we can already prepare. So click on the plus. So next to our slot grid, we need the WB item slot. Okay. And this one would be not a Boolean, but the WB slot, the inventory slot. This is something we definitely gonna need as an object reference. And then click on the plus. What we need are the amount of rows. We wanna make sure that we can set this one up. And this would be type of integer, and then Control D. And we also want to define the amount of slots, also being an integer. And then compile and save. Now we can close the Now let's not close the WB inventory. Let's open up the WB slot inventory now, because we need to set up our slot. Inside our WB inventory slot, we need to have a canvas. Drag this one inside. And then inside this canvas, we want to have the image for our slot. This would be by default our empty slot. When you click on this image, press F2 or just double click, and then you want to rename this to item slot, or you can just rename this also to, let's say, slot image. Doesn't really matter. Slot image, just for us to see and make sure that this one is a variable, but it is by default. And then you can, in this case, put this to top left, anchor. And let's do for the size, let's do 160 by 160. Now let's go to image and we search for the empty slot. Let's get the empty slot. And as for the size, I believe 400 by 400 is perfectly fine, but it doesn't really matter because we do have the size here it's wrapped inside our canvas. So we have the size of 160 by 160, and this is not really going to change. So let's compile and save. Then also, let's go to Content Drawer. While we are at this stage, we can also open up the WB pickup text, and we can also just prepare this one simultaneously. So then we don't need to bother anymore with all the widget stuff. What we need, like we always need, is a canvas panel again, and then we want to have this time next to the canvas, we want to wrap this with the image because we do have an image, and apparently I cannot type here. Image, you put this inside the canvas. And let's call this one take image. Because when you go to image here, let's get the so-called take, just search for take, and then you're gonna have this render full. So this just means it's a symbol next to the text. So now you have something like that, which is pretty small. So I might just wanna go to the anchor here. Let's set this to center, anchor this to the center. And in my case, a position of 53 for the X, and position 400 for Y is good, and size would be 256 by 64. And then the alignment would be 0.5 and 0.5. So this is just for us that the take is now being centered perfectly. Now we want to go to the take image here. Let's click on that, and we want to animate this also. We want to just have this blink effect. We can now click on animation. So while you click on the take image, click on animation, and we want to name this take animation. Or let's do pickup animation. Pickup animation, doesn't really matter. And then click on this pickup animation, and then you're gonna have, when you scroll on the right hand side here, color and opacity on the alpha channel, click here twice. Okay, you need to click twice. And then, sorry, I wanted to open up the animations. And then you can see the color and opacity here for the take image. And now let's click here and let's make sure that this is 0, so the alpha is 0, enter. And then you can, for example, go here after 1.5 seconds, 0.5 seconds, I should say. Let's set the alpha back to 1, and then let's move a little bit further to 1 second, and this one again would be 0. So now we have this blinking animation. So this just means if I zoom in here and open up the animations, and I can toggle or just move this, and then you're gonna have this blinking effect. And this is what you wanna have. And then just compile and save. In order to have this being played inside your game, it's not gonna do anything. So you need to go to graph, and let's just delete the event tick and the pre-construct. The only thing we need is the event construct. You get the pickup animation, drag off of here and play animation. Just play animation. And then you want to make sure that you set this one like so. And as for the playback speed, 1 is fine. We want to have, let's try ping pong. Let me see what I did. Yeah, I did ping pong, and the number of loops to play is 0. So this means it's infinite. And then you will be good to go. Compile and save. And then later we can just use this one basically. But what I did is, let me instead use a custom event for that. So then it's a little easier to find for us. And then we can also make sure that this is also really going to work. So let's just call this one e_pickup animation. Okay. And let's just unhook this and get this one and hook this one up instead. So, and then you can just delete the event construct and put this guy here, and then you will be fine. So we have a custom event inside our pickup text here. Now we can close the pickup text. We can also close the inventory slot. So just make sure that you compile and save. As for the WB inventory, we go back to our designer. Let's just do a preview. We can now search for the WB slot, the widget blueprint slot, and we can put this inside our slot grid. So now let's drag it inside. And now just to see what's going on, you can just Control D, Control D, Control D, and Control D. Let's have 6 different slots here. The first one is row 0 and column 0. The next one would be row 0 and column 1. And the next one would be row 1 and 0. And then the next one would be row 1 and 1. So now I think you understand how this works. Row 2 and 0. And the last one would be row 2 and column 1. And now you can see how these slots are going to look. And I think they have a nice padding here also. If this padding is maybe just a little too big, you can also just go here and for the slot grid and reduce padding to something like 2 maybe. But in my case, I put this back to 3. Otherwise, it's just maybe a little too small overall for the scale grid. The whole thing is now being perfect with our inventory background. Okay, so now you can just get rid of those copies here. Okay, and you also can even get rid of this stuff. We don't need it anymore. It's just for preview purposes because we do logic to spawn or to add those to the uniform grid. Now you can also close the WB inventory and you can also close the BP master item. What we want to do is we go to our third person character, open this one up. We need to add the AC inventory. Just type in AC inventory. So make sure that inside your third person character, your AC inventory is here, compile and save. And then you can just close this one also. And then we go back to our inventory and we open up our AC inventory. So now we have to do a bunch of things. You can just delete the event tick, we don't need that. And you can also actually delete the event begin play and compile and save. So what we're going to need for the AC inventory. So let's click on the functions here on the plus. The first function would be the default inventory state. So we want to define when we open up our inventory that we have empty slots when we start the game. So this is all being set up. Next to the function, we also need a logic called add item to inventory. And then once we add item to inventory, we also want to show the inventory with our tab button, right? And then after that, we also want to be able to hide the inventory. And then when you click on the plus here again, you also want to add obtained items to grid. If I can type correctly here, then just add obtained items to grid, yes. And then we do have set game to UI. This is just what I do. Have a separate function for this. And then click on the plus. And I also want to make sure that I remove occupied slots. So those functions are now prepared. Let's compile and save. We also need a couple of variables here. So click on the plus. The first one would be the inventory itself. So we need to add something to an array. Let's search for the BP master item. But this is a class reference, okay? Pretty important, a class reference. And then on the right-hand side, change this from single to an array because we want to save several items in a so-called array. So all the items we just picked up are now being saved inside here. Also, what I want to prepare, just in case, is the items picked up. Okay, I just want to make sure that I get those as a object reference. Okay, just put this into a so-called object reference. It is again the BP master item, so I just strongly advise you to just duplicate this or just copy this, and then you can just change this from class to object. Okay, this is pretty important that you have this BP master item also as an array, but it is an object reference. Then what we're going to need is you can just Control D this one also, and we call this next one item. Yes, this is item to be picked up. So item to be picked up when we're standing in front of the item, and this is an object reference, yes, but this is a single object, okay? Then just Control D again, this one, and we change this to a class reference, single, okay? So we also want to make sure that we have the single as a class, and we call this one the item class. Then we do need another variable, just click on the plus here, and we need an integer, which would be the item slot. And then I want to make sure that we get also, just in case, maybe we need it, maybe we don't need it. I'm not using it right now, but just in case, I want to make sure that I have the so-called slot occupied. So this is just for me later, but I'm not really sure if we're going to need this. Let's just have it for now, and maybe we can just delete it later. This is just a way for me to understand what kind of slots are currently occupied and what slots are not occupied. So in order to do that, we can use an integer, but we want to switch the integer to a so-called map. So the single one on the left-hand side is still an integer, but on the right-hand side, our map would be a type of bool, a boolean. So this just means that maybe in the slot 1 or slot 2, for example, we can then define if this is occupied or not, this slot later. And compile and save. Then let's do another one. This one would be a single integer, and we call this one slot size. Then another one here. This would be the WB inventory, and we call this one WB inventory. Just Control D. Instead of the WB inventory, you also need the WB inventory slot object, and we call this one WB inventory slot. Then we need two more integers. This one would be the amount of slots. Then just click on the plus. We also need amount of rows. And last but not least, for now, click on the plus. We need the slot grid. And this one is a uniform grid panel. Object reference, the uniform grid panel here. And then just compile and save. And then we can start actually building our AC inventory. So as for the default inventory state here, we just want to double click here and then drag off of here. And we want to first have the WB inventory being spawned. So just create a widget like so, and then open up the drop down and search for the WB inventory, just the WB inventory. And then you can get the WB inventory here, just drag and set. And then we set this one to our widget we just created. And then from here, you can just add to viewport. Just type in add to viewport. Now this is being added. After that, I want to get the amount of slots, because by default, we want to make sure that we get 6 slots. But I want to subtract this by 1, because I told you in the beginning that integer is always starting to count from 0. So this is why I want to make sure that we have this subtracted by 1. And then I can get this result. So this one here, okay, I can get this result. And I want to do a for loop, just a simple for loop. But this one is not the first index, it's the last index. And now when we go amount of slots, we want to set this to 6, okay? Make sure that when you click on this amount of slots, this one needs to be 6 for us. And then you can just organize this a little better and just put it here and then do like so. And then we want to create this how many times? In this case, 6 times. So we need to create widget again, but this time, once our inventory has been created here, okay, we can now on top create the WB slot, the WB inventory slot. And just get your WB inventory slot here and set this like so. Then drag off of here, and we want to make sure that we, no, actually not. You need to get your WB inventory. Just get this one. As for the WB inventory, we can just drag off of here and get the slot grid, okay? This is inside our WB inventory. And I just realized we can go to this slot grid here and just delete this, because I think, yes. So we got this anyway here. So now we have it anyway. We don't need to have this now as a variable. We can just get this one here. We don't really need it. So the only thing we need here is the add child to uniform grid. This is the reason why we need to get this one from our WB inventory. So then you are be able to add the empty slots to the uniform grid, and the content would be the inventory slot. Let me just reroute this so it looks a little better. And also this one here, and just straighten everything. The problem here is that every single time we create the slot inside our inventory, which has been spawned or which has been created already, the problem is when we do our 6 empty slots by default, okay, he's basically triggering or firing off 6 times according to our loop and according to our amount of slots. So 6 minus 0 would be 5, but he's counting from 0 to 5, which means 6 times. Okay, this is the reason why we subtract this by 1 and use this output as a last index instead. Okay, just for you to understand again. But the problem is he's going to set this all in the same spot. So we're going to have 6 empty slots always in row 0 and column 0. It's not going to make any sense. So in order to basically avoid this and align this properly, you need to basically drag off of here and get a so-called percent. Just get the percent integer. And then we're going to get the amount of rows. Get this one. And as for the amount of rows, I set this one to 3. Okay, pretty important. Just click on the rows here and set this also to 3. Not also, but the amount of slots. I told you 6, and the amount of rows is 3. And then you can just connect this one here, and also you drag off of here, and you want to make sure that you get a divide operator. And as for the divide operator, we want to make sure that we swap this input, because we want to divide the index by our amount of rows. And then you're going to have the percent output, which would be for the row, and the division would be for the column. And then you can just get this one. Let me just organize this a little better. So we're going to put this, let me put this to the center, and then I will just reroute this just to make this look a little more accurate. Just pretty quick, like so, like so. Then I will just get this, straighten this one, and straighten this one. And then I think it should be good to go. And then compile and save. The next step would be we wanna do the set game to UI. This is something we wanna do next. So for the set game UI, we get the player controller. Get the player controller. From here, drag off of here and show mouse cursor, but set show mouse cursor. And we want to enable this and then hook it up like so and just make it nice and tidy. Then drag off of here and get the set input mode game and UI. We want to make sure that we use the WB inventory, so just get the WB inventory. We want to hook this one up here. And then you can also just copy this get player controller. And let me get a little more space. We can hook this one. We can hook this one up like so. Pretty cool. So now the player controller, you can see it a little better here, is now connected also. And after that, we want to set game paused. And then, of course, you need to enable this to make this being paused, the game, and then lock always the mouse lock. I just want to have this like lock always, but this is completely up to you. Compile and save. This is basically it for the set game to UI. Now for the add obtained items to grid, we can open this one. We also need to build logic here. This is a little bigger. What we need is the inventory. So once we pick up an item, we add this later to our inventory. So when we add obtained item to the grid, which is something we want to do also, this would be the next step after we have this added to our inventory. We want to do a for each loop, just a for each loop. Get it like so, and also make this nice and tidy. And then you can get the item class here, set the item class, and hook this one up like so. So we do know what kind of items we loop. And then from here, create widget. And the widget would be the WB inventory slot, because now we are overwriting our inventory slot, which is not default anymore, like empty. This is not an empty slot anymore. Once we pick it up, we go through the whole inventory loop and we do know what kind of items we have. Okay, this is why we connect this one. And then we can say, please create this, depending on how many items you have, you need to create this slot. But in this time, we get the WB item slot, just like we did before for our default state. So we make sure that our WB inventory slot is set also. And then we can do after that, we loop, but this is not a for each loop, this is just a for loop, okay? Just a for loop. And then we want to make sure that we get the array index from our inventory. We like all the items you already picked up. We want to make sure how many are inside. So this will be the array output. And we put this into the last index. So if you pick up 3 items, or let's say, yeah, we pick up 3 items, we do know that the array index is firing off 3 times, 0, 1, and 2. And this one would be then 0, 1, and 2. So our loop would trigger this one here also 3 times. Okay, depending on how many items we have currently being stacked inside our inventory class array. And then you can just drag off of here, and let's do, I think we can't, yeah, we can do that actually. Add child to uniform grid, but just disable the context sensitive in this case, and just get this one like so. And then get the WB inventory here, drag off of here. We want to make sure that we get also the slot grid. Enable the context sensitive. And where's the slot grid? Slot get grid. Sorry for that. Get slot grid. It's like so. Get slot grid. This one. And just hook this one up into the target. Let me put it here and do a little bit more space, like so. And then we need the slot, the WB inventory slot. We need this one, and we hook this one up into the content. Pretty simple stuff. And then just get those two, Shift A to align them vertically. And for the loop, we also need logic like we did previously for the empty slot for our default state. Just drag off of here and get the percent again. So this is almost similar. Just get the percent, and we want to align our items. Every time we open up our inventory, we want to align our items like row 1, then row 2 and 3, and then it's aligned properly. This is the reason why we get this percent again, and we put this to 3. And then you can also, from the index, get a divide again. And we also want to divide this loop index basically by 3. Now just get the percent output and also the division output for row and then column, like so. And then you will be good to go. Let me just reroute this to make this look a little better. And then just drag, select, and Q, and this one drag, select, and Q. All right, let me put this up. And then a little more space maybe. And then we're good to go. After we added those things to our uniform grid, we want to also set our brush from texture. So this means we want to have the appropriate thumbnail for each item individually. This means we want to get the inventory slot here again, just get this one. And we want to search for the slot image. So get the slot image, we set as a variable, you remember. And then you can, from the slot image, set brush from texture. Get this one. And let's just hook this one up like so. And let me put this guy here. And then let's just straighten this one. And then straighten this. And like so. As for the texture, he's going to ask you like, okay, I know where to put your image. Yes, inside this slot, okay. But I don't really know what kind of image you want to have. Maybe you want to have different images or something. Yes, we want. So we have the item class, okay. So just get the item class. And now let's drag off here and get class defaults. Just get the class defaults. This is what we set up in our master item. You remember. And now what we can do here, pretty cool stuff. We just get our thumbnail we just set up earlier. Once we assign our thumbnail for each actor PP we create later, our children, we're going to have, of course, different thumbnails inside there, and he's going to get those default values. This is why we hooked up a class. And this is much cheaper compared to the actor object reference. If you're going to use an object reference, Unreal Engine is going to search for each instance in real time during the game we placed. But the class is just avoiding all those calculations and the search where everything is and where everything is like being placed. So the instances, he's just going to avoid the instance. But as for the class, this is more in general, and we can just put all our logic inside our actor PP in advance or beforehand. And this is a lot cheaper compared to using the object reference. So this is the reason why we're using a class also, in terms of performance. Okay, cool. So now we have this. Let me just check if I set up everything here, just in case if I missed something, but I believe this is fine. Okay, and now let's go to remove occupied slots. We also need logic here. This is rather simple. We also just get the inventory here. We also want to loop through this stuff. So we want to see what we have inside our inventory array, which has been picked up already by us. And then you can get your WB inventory. Just get this one. And we want to get the slot grid again. Get slot grid. Just put it here. And then you can drag off of the slot grid and remove child add. And you get this one. As for the target, this is pretty important. This is why we loop through our inventory, because we want to define what kind of empty slots we want to remove. Okay, this means we get the amount of slots, so we do already know how many slots we do have, and then we can just drag off of the loop here, and let's just divide this, and then you can hook this one up like so. We want to get our array, divide this by the amount of slots, and the output would be for our index, where we want to remove this, and then we will be good to go. The reason why we are using the amount of slots and divide this by the array index output is because if you don't do it, he's just deleting the first slot, which is on 0 and 0 in our vector 2D, so x and y. And then he's just, when we pick up the next item, he's not really deleting the second one, but he's deleting like the third one, and then he's just he's skipping basically slots. This is the reason why we need to divide this by the exact amount we set up in total to make this accurate. So then he's like step by step deleting every single slot once we pick something up. Okay, this is it for this logic here. Next thing we need to do is we go to hide inventory. We also need logic here. What we need is the is game paused. You remember when we show our inventory, we set this to yes, it is enabled, but now we can just hook up a branch, because when our game is paused, we do know that this is true. And then we want to set game paused, and we just leave it blank. We don't enable this one. And then get the WB inventory, right click, convert to a validated get. And we want to, from the WB inventory, we want to remove from parent. So we're just hiding our inventory again, or we basically not just hiding, we remove the whole widget. And then same stuff, we just want to get our player controller again. Get player controller, drag off of here and show mouse cursor, set show mouse cursor here, and make sure that this one is being disabled. And then you can drag off of here, or you know what, let me just copy this again, just to make things a little cleaner. Set input mode game only, and then connect this one like so. All right, this is basically it for the hide inventory. Then we do need a logic for the add item to inventory. So let's go to add item to inventory. We need the item to be picked up. So this is basically the item we want to pick up in this state. Just get this one, right click and convert this one to a validated get. So first things first, we just want to make sure that we are basically really standing in front of that. Otherwise we can't really pick it up. And then if it's valid, we want to have also the inventory, because we want to add this now finally to our inventory. So let's get this one and just add. And now he's asking for what kind of item you want to add to the inventory. Of course, it would be the item to be picked up. So this is the one we are just currently overlapping with. So just get class. Okay, we need to convert this to a class. So we are less specific, but this is perfectly fine. Now we do know what kind of item we are basically adding. Then get your item slot here on the right hand side. Get this one. We prepared this one already. And now we can set it. It's just the other way around. I mean, if you don't set it up in advance, you can just get this one here and promote this one to a variable. This one basically, now you can see it's the same stuff, but it doesn't really matter how you set it. I just set this one up in advance. Those variables here, in this case, the item slot and also the item class, you can also just right click here on the get class, promote to a variable, and then you're gonna basically have this one also, the item class here. Just get this one and you can set it like so. So now we do know that this one has data once we pick it up. And this one would be the class of the item to be picked up. After this, we can just copy these items to be picked up. And then also you get the items picked up, the array. Get the items picked up array. And we also want to add this one, just to make sure that we also have an instance array. So basically an array saving all the instances, especially later when you want to define after you save your game and you just re-enter your game, that we do have an array, the information of our instances, so we can delete our specific instances from our level or our game, just in case. So this is pretty mandatory, why we do need to have the specific instances also being added to another array. But we are not really using it now. It's just really important that we have this. And also what we're not really using right now, but it's just really important for me, that we do also have the information, the slot occupied, the map. You can just drag off of here and add. Okay. And just connect this one like so, pretty simple stuff. And let me just straighten this a little bit and get the item slot. So we want to make sure where is this one. So where's the slot? And then we can define, yes, now it's occupied. We just want to enable this one. This specific slot from where we just picked this one up. And then we will be good to go, because this just means like when we pick up one item, the inventory index of our inventory would be 0. So our item slot would be 0. And then he's gonna add this 0 value here to our map. Then next time we're gonna add another one. The index would be 1. So the item slot would be 1, and it's being added here also. Okay, so every single time we put, every single time we grab an item, the item slot will be here, and we just transfer this to a so-called map, and we add this to a so-called map, and we do know that, for example, if we pick up 2 items, so 0 and 1 in our index of our inventory, we do know that the index of our item slot 0 and 1 is now being true. So this means true is occupied. But like I said, we don't really use it for now. It's just good to have it. So then we want to drag off of here, and let's do destroy actor. If you can't find it, you can also, instead of disabling the context sensitive, you can just get this item to be picked up. And since this is an instance, we can just destroy actor right away. And do like so. Pretty sweet. And this is it for the add item to inventory. Now let's just reevaluate. Okay, so first things first, we do have the default inventory logic here. So first we add our inventory, we want to make it visible, and then we loop through the slots and define how many empty slots we want to have. Then we add the item to our inventory. We want to make sure that we check always if the item to be picked up is valid. It needs to be valid, otherwise he's not going to do anything. So this is just for us to make sure that this is firing off only once, because we destroy an actor. And if this is not valid, if you just press the button F to pick it up and you not really have this valid check, this just means when you just press F, it's getting fired like 4, 5, 6 times, because it's really fast, you know, it's frame by frame. So you just press the button and it's already firing 3, 4, 5, 6 times, depending on how long you press the button. And this means, like, for the first frame, he's just getting this logic and destroying the actor. But if you don't really have this logic here, the valid check, he's just firing off every frame. And this means on frame 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, so depending on how long you press your button, he's trying to destroy the item to be picked up, but it is already destroyed. So if it's not valid anymore after first frame, he's not going to do anything. Otherwise, you're going to get errors. Okay, and next one, we want to obtain items to grid. So here we're just making sure that we have the inventory and get the reference to our class. So our inventory is filled with the stuff we picked up. And we want to make sure that we create also the slot for the inventory. So our item will appear inside the grid. So here's the logic on how to set up the grid. And then when we get our item class, we can define our thumbnail. And this is why we have the item class here. And the item class, when it's being cycled through the whole loop, we do know what kind of items we have. This is gonna make sense, okay? Next one, after we obtain the item and put this to our grid, we also want to remove the occupied slots. This is what we just did a couple of seconds ago. So pretty simple stuff. We are again searching our inventory, or we are looping through our inventory, and then when we see everything which has been picked up, we just remove this from our grid. So he knows, because it is stored inside our inventory. Then we do have the show inventory. So the show inventory, I did this as a last step because we do now have all the functions for that. This is pretty cool. So now we can just get our default inventory state. So we have all the logic for this. And then I just want to do a sequence to keep things clean. So let's do a sequence after that. After our default inventory state, we always want to check our set game to UI. So this means we can't move, our game is paused, and we have our mouse cursor. And then after that, we want to add the obtained items to grid. So every single time we tap, okay, so when we want to show our inventory, we press the input action tab. We want to make sure that just in case if we picked up already some items, we have this now in our sequence here, that this one will be always in our inventory. And then let's do another pin. And then we can also remove at the same time, or not really at the same time, directly after this, we can just remove our occupied slots. Compile and save. Now let's close everything here, all the stuff we have, except for the event graph. because for the event graph, we do need the so-called IA inventory. Let's get the enhanced action event inventory. We set this one up at the beginning of our lecture. And this is pretty simple. You can just use the triggered button. You don't need to do anything else, and you just get the flip-flop. And for the flip-flop, you just want to make sure that you want to show the inventory. This is what we set up already. So when I open this one up, the show inventory, this whole logic is like the whole chain we have. Every single time we open up our inventory, just for you to understand. And then on B, we just get the hide inventory, this one. Or you can just drag and drop this hide inventory here and connect. This doesn't really matter how you want to find your function. And then for the IA, let me search IA pickup item, enhanced action event pickup item, we want to also do the add item to inventory. So this means only when we press F, we can add actually something to our inventory and not directly. This is just the reason why we need to do that. Okay, so one last step we need to do is we need to set up our BP master item. We need to collide with it, and once we collide with our item, we can actually do this one here, okay? Otherwise, we can't really add anything. So we need to go to our content drawer. Let's open up the BP master item. And we want to make sure that we delete everything here by default inside our event graph. And we can also close the construction script. So for our event graph, let's click on the pickup collision, scroll all the way down here. We need the begin overlap, and also for the pickup collision, we need the end overlap. Let's make some space. What we need to do for the begin, we need to cast from other actor, cast to third person character. And then you can promote this one to a variable. So now we do know that we cast all the information to our character regarding this item. And we can call this variable just BP character. This is our actor blueprint. And then from here, let's compile. From here, we can also get the AC inventory. You remember that we added this to our third person character, the AC inventory. This is wrong, sorry for that. Get AC inventory, this one here, down, the blue one. So this is our actor component. And right click here, and you should promote this one to a variable as well. And then we do have data for this. So let me just straighten everything. From the AC inventory, you do know that inside the AC inventory, we set up a variable called item to be picked up. Set this one, because once we overlap with our specific item we have in our scene, we want to make sure that we connect this one to our item, and the item to be picked up is self. So this current item this item we are currently overlapping with. Now we do know what kind of item it is. This is pretty important. And then you can just create another widget. And the widget in this case, when we want to pick up something, is the WB pickup. Just get the pickup text. And you can promote this one. Do we need to promote this one to a variable? Yeah, we should promote this one to a variable. Makes sense. WB pick up text. Because we want to also remove this one when we're not overlapping anymore, and then you can just add to viewport. So this text is now being spawned. But this is not everything. We want to get this W pickup text now. We just created this variable. We just want to get this also. And we can from here cast the custom event, the E pickup animation. You remember this one. Inside the pickup widget blueprint, we set up an animation for the blink. And this is the custom event we just created. So we are making sure that we don't have just a boring text up here, but there's also this nice animation appearing. As for the pickup end overlap, the end overlap here, this is pretty important. First, we want to do an isValid check. Okay, what we want to check is, we want to check it for the pickup text. So if the pickup text is still valid, we want to make sure when we are not overlapping anymore with the box collision attached to our item, okay, we want to make sure that we get this text. So just copy this one. It doesn't really matter how you connect it. Remove from parent. It's just important that you connect this this variable and just hook it up like so. Once this text has been removed and the animation itself as well automatically, you want to get the BP character here we just created, set the BP character, and leave it like so. This means it's not connected, and this is pretty crucial. So now the data we have is now set to none. And also for the AC inventory, just get the, where is it? Oh, here, sorry. Get the AC inventory. And then just get, set the item to be picked up. So once we pick this up, or we just leave, we do know that the item to be picked up is also a none. So just leave it empty, it's not connected. The BP character and the item to be picked up is none every single time the collision is, and it's gone. So once we pick it up, the collision is gone. So end overlap will always fire once we pick it up anyway, or we just leave the pickup range. This is always for us really to make sure that this one has no data anymore during this process. Okay. And then I believe we should be good to go. Let's check if everything works out, and then we might just want to fix a couple of bugs, but let's try if everything works. So I can press tab. I do have the inventory. And also let me just get the BP master item. And then let's try to pick this one up. I can go here. I have the text. I can press F. And now I have the text. And the reason why this is completely white is because we forgot to set up for the master item the image. So let's go here on the thumbnail. And for the thumbnail, we want to have the card. Do I have it? Box thumbnail. But I might just want to rename this. So this is called thumbnail. Okay. So compile and save. And this is where you basically change your items. So you can go here, take it. Now you have it, and the slot, the occupied slot or the empty slot is gone. And you can just do this a bunch of times. Let me just Alt drag and Alt drag. And then I also want to do, when I go to inventory, right click on my master item. Let's do a child blueprint class. And we call this one BP pistol for now. This might be the first one we just want to pick up and really use. So the BP pistol makes sense. So this is a child. This means we want to change the texture to pistol. So you have this already, image pistol. Make sure your thumbnail is being updated. And the static mesh, click on the static mesh. You want to make sure that this is also your pistol mesh, your SM pistol. And it makes sense to maybe just, let's do the snapping here and just put it up like so. Maybe this is a little better, but this is up to you. As for the box collision, compile and save, what we can do for the master item, you can now expose the pickup collision. You can expose this on spawn. This means for the construction script, you do now have, when you get the pistol also, let me press G, you can see now the box collision. But like I said, you can now get this box collision here, and you might just want to have, maybe let's do 20, 20, 20, and let's go into the child, the BP pistol, and you can also just set this one down. Put this one down like so. Let's do pickup collision here. Let's do 30, and here we should do 10 maybe. And also 20, something like this. And then save this. Save. Let's go. If something vanishes, thanks to the web partition, just save, file, open level, and reopen your third person level. Just reopen it. And then you will be good to go. Just in case if something vanishes, and then you can just, let me activate the snapping here for the location. Boom. And let me get another one. And then let me delete this and this. And also this one, because I want to place it again, just to keep things clean. So now, and we can put it here. Perfect. So let's save. Let's just in case open our level again, just to make sure. And let's play. So now I don't have any items. I can pick it up. I can also just overlap with this. I can just leave, the text is gone, and I can't pick up anymore. So you can see, but I can go here, I can pick it up, I have 2, I can pick it up, I have 3, I can pick this one up, I have 4, and this one, 5, and I have this cardboard box, and now I have 6. Pretty cool stuff. So this is now the stage we are in currently. And in the next lecture, we're going to add more logic and start to slowly interact with these, for example, pistol. So yeah, we're just going to build more stuff. Thanks.